What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Friday edition of the Stochastic NHL Strategy. I forgot what day it was for a second there. It's been, obviously Christmas, Hanukkah going on. Hope everyone had a safe and fun Christmas. If you celebrate, Hanukkah started on Christmas Day evening. If you celebrate that, I am bearing the fruits of my labor. I am enjoying a nice cold right now. Goddamn kids. If you're a dad or a mom in the chat, hopefully we aren't sick until April, but no promises there. We're back for a nice 8-game slate here. NHL unfreezes tomorrow, so there can't be any trades today. So if you're a Rangers fan wondering why Kreider is still on the team, that's probably why. Cliffy's back from his travels. How was your holidays with the fam?
Good, man. Always nice to go see some family. Just spent better part of 2.5 days either laying on the couch watching sports or movies, or sitting at a table and eating food and drinking beers and wine. So can't really complain about that. Interesting 8-game slate we have ahead of us. There is a ton of injury news across the board. And obviously, we have a new coach in Detroit. We'll talk about that. There are a couple of very, very chalky spots that are probably chalky for a reason, and we'll get to those. So between the injuries and the chalk, I think this is going to be a very interesting slate to break down, because sometimes you and I talk about bad chalk, like whenever Nashville's at home and their ownership is like 6 times their top 2 stack percentage, or the Islanders or something like that. But in this case, it's teams on the road, but teams in very good spots. So I think it's very much worth going through. We always talk about every game, but paying special attention to those chalky spots, because I don't think it's necessarily bad chalk on the board here tonight.
Yeah. And there's not one that's really like 38% where you're like, like it's spread out to like there's a bunch of lines in the high teens. So there are some chalky spots, but it's at least spread out where it's not like, Colorado 1's going to be 41% on a 9-gamer, and you have to make a decision whether you want them to make or break your night. And you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So luckily, this is a little bit better than that. Let's get into the slate. Before we do, just wanted to say thank you guys for all your support for really, it's been about a year now as I just hit puberty for the first time, my voice cracked. But it's been about a year since we have switched over to the affiliate program. As we mentioned before, we weren't really sure how it was going to go, but you guys crushed it, and we're here for you guys. And thank you. And if you do want to go premium, you can click the link in the chat, use promo code Stochastic15. That will give you 15% off your first week or month of any subscription. I saw someone use promo code Stochastic15 for a max all access avatar pass. You guys, whoever that was, thank you. You are a psycho, but we do appreciate psychos here. Let's get into this slate. And I know we talked about chalk and good spots. This first game is neither. Chicago Blackhawks with a 2.6 total heading into Buffalo. The Sabres have a 3.3. Buffalo going Thompson, Tuck, Zucker, Peterka, Cousins, Quinn, Benson, Kulich, Krebs. Chicago going Bedard, Hall, Bertuzzi, Donato, Nazar, Foligno, and then Dickinson, Teravainen, and Mikheyev. Now, I see we have a fresh top stacks run. I will not refresh until I kick it to Cliffy, because I will disconnect. So I apologize for the stale ownership that I'm about to mention. It'd probably be very close to what it actually is. Now, Buffalo finally won a game. That was their first win, I think, in 14 games or something like that. Just brutal scenes. So this is a pretty decent matchup for Buffalo. I just like these line combinations for the Sabres just really have not been great. Like, yeah, it's a 70-minute sample for that Thompson line, but they're underwater. The Cousins, Peterka, Quinn in a 67-minute sample, they're underwater. Kulich, Benson, Krebs, very small sample, but underwater. So, like, yeah, maybe Chicago is just what the doctor ordered, but like Chicago is not an awful defensive team. They're kind of middle of the pack. The Bedard, Bertuzzi, Hall line in a smallish sample have been pretty good defensively. Donato and Foligno, decent defensively. Honestly, their worst defensive line right now is that Dickinson, Teravainen, and Mikheyev line. And, they'll see, bottom 6 matchups with the Sabres. So I'm not super thrilled about playing Buffalo here, especially that top line being 19,000. They're not my favorite on the night. Now, they do have the Sabres have the highest home total. So, like, that's something at least to consider here. But again, like, I don't particularly love these lines. Chicago isn't awful defensively. That Bedard, Hall, Bertuzzi line has been decent defensively. Like, I'm not going to prioritize Buffalo on the slate. If you want to play them in MME, I think they're more of an MME play. That second line, I think, is a little bit more interesting just because they're 12,100. They are coming in with 8.6% projected ownership. Seems pretty high, but, they have been playing together a bunch this season. Their sample's around 70 minutes. It's all right. It's nothing to ride home about. Maybe I'd like one off Peterka or one off Quinn here since they're both on the top power play and, Quinn's only 2,800. I don't think I'd full stack them at almost 9%. My interest, honestly, is on the Chicago side a little bit more. Like, I'm not super thrilled about playing Chicago either. That Chicago top line, Bedard, Hall, Bertuzzi, like, they haven't been very high event, and their expected goals aren't great, but their actual goals are. And the Thompson, Tuck, Zucker line has been awful defensively. So for 14,100, I do have a little bit of interest in that Bedard line. But again, like, this game, I'm not really prioritizing anything, and I think I would save it for MMA.
Yeah, it's kind of – I don't hate the spot here for Buffalo, and they do have a 3.3 total. Like, that's not nothing. I think two things is kind of keeping me away from the top line. One, it's that price of $19K. And the fact that they're not getting a ton of ice time, right? Like, there were points this season where you could rely on Tage Thompson skating 19 to 20 minutes a night. I don't know if anybody's checked his game log lately for ice time. He's gone 5 straight games skating under 18 minutes. Now, there's a couple blowouts in there, but it's pretty notable that there is a game against Toronto where they lost 5-3, and it was a 2-2 game halfway through the second period. There's that game against Boston where it was a 1-1 game in the third period, and Tage skated a little over 17 minutes. So even when the game's close, he's still only skating 17 to 17 and a half minutes. So, like, I don't think you can rely on the top line at this point until Lindy Ruff decides otherwise, to skate more than 18 minutes. And if you're only going to skate 17 to 18 minutes and you're not perfectly correlated, the power play has been largely struggling. Chicago's penalty kill has been very good. Now, Chicago's penalty kill has been riding a bit hot by save percentage, and by a bit, I mean a lot. But over their last 15 games, top 5 for fewest shot attempts and shots and goals against on the penalty kill. So it's not a good power play spot for the Sabres. At 5-on-5, their top line's just not getting a lot of ice time. Like, if I'm paying $19K for a line and they're not perfectly correlated, I'd want a lot of ice time from them at least. Kind of like Colorado. Now, Colorado's a little bit more expensive, but they're not perfectly correlated, but you can rely on at least 2, if not all 3, to skate at least 20 minutes. So for that reason, like, I think I agree with you. Like, 20, I'd be much more interested in Buffalo. Top line, if I was 20 maxing, 150 certainly. Single entry, like, until they start showing more signs of life, at least in terms of ice time, I don't have a lot of interest in stacking a 19K uncorrelated line in a bad power play spot, skating 17 to 18 minutes. I just don't. For me, if anything, it would probably be that Buffalo second line, Peterka, Cousins, Quinn. Now, they've had a poor shooting percentage, 5.9%. That's keeping their goals for down. But if they could start converting at a higher rate, which they probably should, they could be an above average scoring line. And they're only 12,100. We're coming in with a lot of ownership because you do get Peterka and Quinn on the power play. Because they are so cheap, you can fit them in with Colorado or Vegas, and we'll talk about those lines later. But if you just want a one-off Peterka or something like that, or one-off Quinn, I think you can do that. But I'm more interested in Buffalo 2, maybe even Buffalo 3 as cheap fillers than I do paying 19K for a line that could only skate 17 minutes here tonight. So it's Buffalo depth or nothing for me. On the Chicago side, on the plus side, at least Connor Bedard is getting a lot of ice time. He's been skating like 20 minutes a game over his last 10 games. That's nice to see. Obviously, he's skating on the top line with Tyler Bertuzzi. Tyler Bertuzzi has come alive lately, and he's been getting some ice time. He's on the power play as well. Not really too worried about the matchups on the Buffalo side. But what I will say is a lot of their success has been driven by shooting percentage. 18.1% has been the top line shooting percentage for Chicago. Like half that would probably be normal for this team. So I don't think they're that much more of an above average-ish offensive line rather than a very, very good offensive line, as they've shown. But Buffalo, basically up until Monday, had been one of the teams you could rely on to get their faces pounded in almost every night. So I don't mind the Chicago top line here. They're not one of my favorite lines. I think I kind of agree with whoever said that in the chat earlier. Chicago 3, I think Michael Peterson said that in the chat. Teravainen, Dickinson, and Mikheyev. They have been getting decent amounts of ice time, anywhere between 15 and 17 minutes. Their numbers aren't that great, but the Buffalo depth has certainly struggled as well. So, you get Teravainen on the power play, so like a two-man of him and Dickinson, Teravainen, Mikheyev, something like that. But I genuinely do think I still have more interest in Chicago's top line than the depth. So it's kind of the inverse. For me, it's Chicago top line, then maybe some depth. And on the Buffalo side, it would be probably the depth over the top line, at least in single entry.
Yeah, I mean, I wish this game started at 5:45 p.m. Eastern, so it was on the slate. But it is, and we kind of agree. Toronto Maple Leafs with a 3.2 total. Heading into Detroit, the Red Wings have a 2.8. New coach for Detroit, Todd McClellan in. I don't have really a strong feeling either way for Todd McClellan. It can't get much worse in Detroit. And they didn't run lines, but they did run power play, and it was DeBrincat, Larkin, Kane, Raymond, Cider. I don't know. Now I'm all thrown off, but it doesn't matter. They loaded the power play unit. That's a win as it is for Detroit. They finished their last game with DeBrincat, Larkin, Kane, Raymond, Comfer, Rasmussen. But again, that was a different coach. They didn't report lines in practice, so we'll have to wait and see. And then Toronto's running Marner, Tavares, Pacioretty, Nylander, Nyes, Holmberg. Matthews is out today and tomorrow, or the next game. I don't know if it's tomorrow or not, but he re-aggravated his upper body injury that kept him out before. So I'm going to give analysis under the assumption that it's Larkin, DeBrincat, Kane. Really, it would be the same analysis as a Larkin, DeBrincat, Raymond line or a Larkin, Kane, Raymond line. So a loaded Detroit one. Now, with DeBrincat and Kane, they'd be 17,400, 2.7% projected ownership. Normally, when Detroit has a loaded top line, I would be super interested. I'm a little bit mum on it. Marner and Tavares have been very, very good defensively this season at 5-on-5. new coach, like I don't know how much that really plays. It's hard to, quantify from a micro perspective. But it's a tough matchup 5-on-5. I will say it's a pretty good power play matchup, and that line would be fully correlated. But for 17-4, I think I would not prioritize them in single entry. I would prefer them in MME. We have other lines in that price range that we'll talk about. Boston one. I'm not a huge Boston fan. We don't have Minnesota lines, but if it is Rossi, Zuccarello, Boldy, they're cheaper than Detroit one. That Nico Hischier line that we'll talk about in a little bit. They're only $500 more. So they're kind of priced in no man's land. It's a tough 5-on-5 matchup. It is a good power play matchup, and that's why I would want to have some in MME. Again, they can completely change their lines, and all of this just goes out the window. But if they're running a loaded power play unit, I have a feeling Todd McClellan will have a loaded top line. On the Toronto side, it would easily be Tavares, Marner, Pacioretty for me. As a stack, I think William Nylander is a very, very strong one-off here tonight. It's a good power play spot. He plays all 2 minutes on the power play. So if I was going to stack a line, it would be Marner, Tavares, Pacioretty at $19K. But I think my favorite play on Toronto is just one-offing Nylander and calling it a day. Like, I would imagine there's going to be some goals scored in this game. It is a 6 total. I just don't particularly love the matchup for Detroit one. I don't really love the Leafs without Matthews, but, Nylander getting the full 2 minutes on the power play in a good power play matchup definitely helps.
Yeah, I'll start with Detroit quickly. I wrote up an article earlier today on the coaching change at a different fantasy site that I write for. And the one thing every Todd McClellan team does is push the pace. Whether you look at his last few years with the Kings, whether you look at, the mid to late teens that he was behind the bench for the Oilers, he always pushed the pace, whether the game was tied, whether they're down to, whether they're up to, it didn't matter. They always pushed the pace basically at both ends. Like it felt like sometimes they were giving up a bit of defense for some more offense. Now, that's pretty important for Detroit if they can actually do that, because this team this season is dead last by shots per minute at 5-on-5, like absolute dead last. And by shot attempts per minute, the only team taking fewer at 5-on-5 is Chicago. By goals scored, the only team scoring less is Nashville. Like this has legitimately been one of the worst even strength scoring teams in the NHL. And it's not just luck. They just weren't generating anything. So if he can get them to push the pace, I think it'll help them a lot at even strength. And remember, this team, I think last year they were top 10, both at even strength and on the power play by goals per minute. Like this was a good offensive team last year. They just completely fell off the map this year with largely the same group. If McClellan can kind of get them back to where they were 12 months ago, it seemingly would change the fortunes quite a bit here. Now, because we don't know what the lines are going to be, it's hard to say what to recommend, but I agree with you that no matter what Detroit one is, now I would prefer like Raymond X, so like Raymond and DeBrincat or something like that rather than Kane. But Larkin, Raymond, and whomever, I would have interest in that in this matchup, because whether McClellan can get them to push the pace immediately, I think that's one question. Like he was literally hired yesterday. So like not exactly a lot of time to implement and practice his systems. But if he can get them back to where they were, this time last year, that's a big improvement offensively for this team. Whether you want to bet on that in DFS, I think that's another question. But considering nobody's going to be playing them, I don't really have a problem going with Detroit one, assuming it's Larkin, Raymond, and whomever, especially where they're loading the top power play. That power play has generally been good this year. Toronto taking fewer penalties of late, but even over the last 5 weeks, they're still a little bit higher than league average by time shorthanded per game. So not a bad power play spot for Detroit. 2.8 total, it's not nothing. We'll look at other games later, but New Jersey's 2.9, Columbus is 2.9, St. Louis is 2.6, San Jose's 2.6. They're not amongst the worst for a home total here. I don't mind Detroit 1 as long as it's a fully loaded line, but if they do something like Rasmussen, Larkin, Kane, or something like that, then I would be out. But if it's like DeBrincat, Larkin, Raymond, I would certainly be considering them. On the Toronto side, I do like Nylander as a one-off. He's been shooting the puck a lot. I believe Nylander's just under 4 shots per game over his last 20 games. There's a lot of shot bonuses in there. I don't like him playing with Pontus Holmberg. It's kind of like that Simon Holmstrom thing with the Islanders, where he doesn't really help them a whole lot, certainly not offensively. I would probably go to Toronto 1. Pacioretty and Tavares, even without Nylander on the other wing, 3.3 expected goals, 64 shot attempts per 60 minutes. Still get 2 out of the 3 guys on the top power play unit. I'm not sure how much better defensively Detroit is going to get overnight. At 19,000, the price is a bit steep, considering you don't get Pacioretty on the power play. What I will say is that one of Detroit's big Achilles heels this year has been the penalty kill, and Toronto's power play was legitimately very good without Austin Matthews. They got a bit lucky by shooting percentage, but they're also creating a ton of shots. So I think I like both top lines here, but William Nylander is my favorite one-off in this game.
Yep. My eyes are watering so bad right now, so I apologize if I look like I just snorted a line of Coke. Carolina Hurricanes with a 2.7 total. Heading into New Jersey, the Devils have a 2.9 total. Whew! Devils going Hischier, Meyer, Nason, Hughes, Bratt, Palat. Carolina going Aho, Jarvis, Roslovic, Netchis, Svechnikov, Kotkaniemi. So Cliffy talked about the other day that Carolina has not been as good as defensively as they had been at the beginning of the season. And that Roslovic, Aho, Jarvis line, that's big facts. It's certainly possible, but not today. Just kidding. Sometimes that Roslovic line in a 50-minute sample has an expected goals over 3. And that they're going to see Nico Hischier, Meyer, and Nason a lot here since the games in New Jersey. And that line has been insanely good with Nason there over Mercer. And they're 17,900. They're coming in at 2% projected. I really like them here. I much prefer them to Detroit 1. I know it's a perceived tough matchup, but at that ownership, I'm fine with them in single entry. That line has been so much better with Nason than with Mercer. It's night and day. The Aho, Jarvis, Roslovic line hasn't been great. I really, really like the Hischier Meyer line here tonight. I don't mind the Hughes Bratt Palat line, but they're 19,800. I'd rather save the 1,900 here and get a better secondary stack. I'm completely fine with them in single entry. I'm fine with them in any format. On the Carolina side, I'm out on the Aho, Jarvis, Roslovic line. 1, the Nico Hischier line has been amazing at both ends. 2, they're going to see a lot of that Kovacevic pairing, and they've been easily top 3 in the NHL at home. I don't love Netchis, Svechnikov, Kotkaniemi because Kotkaniemi doesn't really do anything for me. Like a Netchis one-off, I guess, is fine. Svechnikov one-off is fine, but really, I don't think I'll be playing Carolina at all today.
Yeah. I'll start on the Carolina side. One, I don't have faith that Roslovic is going to last the game there. We have definitely seen Carolina's switch their lines a lot over the last 10, 12 games. And you mentioned how Carolina's defense has been sliding. The last 25 games, bottom half of the league by expected goals against and actual goals against at 5-on-5. Last 10 games, bottom half of the league by expected goals against and actual goals against at 5-on-5. So, like, it's not just a recent thing that, like, this is going back, like I said, 25 games. Even if you look at just like the last 10 thinking that it was a blip, it's not. This team has been performing poorly at 5-on-5 for quite a while now, especially on the defensive end. Carolina one's going to run into that Kovacevic Siegenthaler pairing, as you mentioned, so no interest in them. Carolina two, like Svechnikov and Kotkaniemi have just never played well together. This year, they're at like 70 minutes together or something like that, under 1 goal per 60 minutes. Last year in 170 minutes together, 2.1 goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. The year before that, again, 360 minutes, 2.1 goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. Like, we now have sample going back 3 years of this line, or of that duo, Kotkaniemi, Svechnikov, being well below average offensively. So no interest in them. I guess Carolina 3 would be fine. Martinook, Stahl, Carrier at 8,300. The thing is like, unless you're power play stacking Colorado, I'm not sure why you would need an $8,300 line or something like that here tonight. So, like, if anything, Carolina 3, but not a lot of interest on the Hurricane side. My interest, I agree with you, is on the New Jersey side. I think both lines are fine. I don't necessarily think that, I do think the Hischier line is a little bit better with Nason, but it's not like the Hughes line is unplayable or anything like that. Two things that concern me is, one, Jesper Bratt's just not been shooting the puck a whole lot. He has 21 shots in his last 15 games. So, like, you really need a goal and an assist with a couple shots, like, just to get to decent value from him. So where you need a multi-point game from him for value, it's just a lot to ask. Like, I agree with you. I'd probably go to Hischier, Meyer, Nason. Like, there were times where we have said you could probably leave Meyer off. He's not getting a ton of ice time. He's been closer to like 17-ish minutes, but 3.5 shots per game over his last 20 games. He has certainly come alive lately in the goal scoring department. I'm fine with just going Hischier, Meyer, Nason, especially where Carolina is still pretty good on the PK. So, like, I don't think you have to take out Meyer to put in Hughes, to put in Brad or something like that. I would just go Hischier, Meyer, Nason. As you said, they've been excellent this year. 4.7 expected goals, 3.6 actual goals per 60 minutes. So it is that Hischier line I like best in this game. I think the Hughes line is perfectly fine. And considering that no one's playing them, like a 1.2% Jack Hughes line at home on an 8-game slate kind of scares me. I'm not going to lie to you. But I really do like that matchup for the Hischier line. So Hischier line for me, then the Hughes line, then I guess Carolina 3 as a filler. I don't have a ton of interest in the expensive Carolina guys.
Yeah, it's weird not having any interest in Carolina, but going into New Jersey is just not a pleasant experience anymore. I think Markstrom had back-to-back 12-save shutouts. Like, they haven't allowed 20 shots on goal in like 9 games or something absurd like that. Like, they just going into New Jersey sucks. I guess that's a blanket statement. The state, the team, the drones. Anyway, Boston Bruins with a 3.3 total heading into Columbus. Our Blue Jackets with a 2.7 total. The disrespect from the Vegas odds makers here. 2.7 total. It's a sham.
I will say it has moved up a bit to 2.9 through the day, which I kind of understand.
There we go. A little bit of respect for the Marchenkos and the Voronkovs of the world. Sean Monahan looked dead to rights before he went to Montreal and somehow revived his career. He needs to be studied. Could be HGH. But this is an interesting matchup. Columbus 1 is legitimately one of the best lines in the NHL. and they're still priced under $16,000. 3.75 expected goals per 60, over 6 actual goals per 60. So, like, yeah, they're shooting hot, but they're still creating almost 4 expected goals per 60. So even if the shooting percentage comes down, they'll be fine. Yes, the Boston matchup isn't great from a 5-on-5 perspective. Zacha, Pastrnak, Geeky have been pretty good defensively. The Boston goaltending has not been very good. It is Korpisalo, I believe, tonight. He has been better than Swayman. He still hasn't been great. It's not an elite power play spot either. They are coming in a little bit more than their top two, 9.7%. Top two, 10.8% projected ownership. But, like, that's a price thing, right? Because this line has been rolling all season. They should be in the 18, 19 Ks at this point, like, based off their production. So, like, at that price, I'm completely fine with it. If they were priced like the Wings top line or the Nico Hischier line, like, it would be a different conversation. But, like, 15,800, they are in play, especially at home, because they go out I forgot the word I was going to use, but they go out a ton with Zach Werenski. And Cliffy talked about the prospect who came up, Danton Matejchuk. Like, they just have puck movers on every pair now. So I'm in on Columbus one. The Columbus depth, I'm not too interested in. Like, obviously, I'm a big Ken Johnson guy, but, like, he's with Cole Sillinger and Olivier. Like, Olivier has been pretty good this season, but Cole Sillinger is, the Jacob Trubas of the Leo Carlson. I don't know why I just slandered Leo Carlson, but I apologize, Frostback. Cole Sillinger doesn't do anything for me. Fantilli, JVR, ZAR, just not it. So it would be Columbus one or bust. On the Boston side, this is a really good power play matchup. I just like the Boston top line, Zacha, Geeky, Pastrnak, 16,700, 19.3% projected ownership. And they're not even creating 3 goals per 60, expected 3 goals, or they're not even creating 3 expected goals per 60 minutes in an almost 200-minute sample. It's a tough 5-on-5 matchup. Yes, that Monahan line has been sliding a little bit defensively, but that Monahan line has been controlling a fair bit of the play. I don't particularly love Boston one as a stack. Obviously, Pastrnak is on the power play, and I'm good with that. My preferred line is Marchand, Lindholm, Coyle at 13.5, 4.5% top 2 stack, 8.3% projected ownership. Like, the depth of Columbus, awful defensively. You still get 2 guys on the top power play unit. If you want to leave off Coyle and add in Pasta to make it a power play stack, I think that's fine. But it would be Columbus 1, Boston 2 for me.
Yeah, I think it is important to note that it is Korpisalo starting instead of Swayman, because Swayman's been legitimately awful. Like, by goals saved above expected, he's costing the Bruins basically a goal every 2 games, thereabouts, whereas Korpisalo has actually been positive. So, Korpisalo, it's funny, Korpisalo got blown up in his first game of the season, 6 goals against Florida. Hasn't given up more than 4 against since, and only given up more than 3 once. So, like, it's been pretty good basically for the last 2.5 months now, or at least 2 months. So it is kind of a tough matchup for Columbus. Boston has been much, much better defensively than they were earlier in the season. Both top lines better than league average by expected goals against. Actual goals against suffering. Again, I think a lot of that is with just Swayman's start to the season being so poor. So, like, I do like Columbus here. I like Columbus whenever they play. That's not a shocker. But as a chalky spot in that price range, like, I think there are a couple lines elsewhere on the slate that I would rather play. I'm not going to say I don't like playing Columbus here. I think they're perfectly fine. With that perfect correlation at that price, like it's hard to ignore. And, a 9.7% top two stack, I think is the 7th highest on the board here tonight. So it's not like, that 10.8% ownership is anything extreme. Like they've earned what they've gotten. I just think there are a couple other stacks I might play in that range instead, but I've no issue with going to Columbus one here. I really don't, not for ownership, not for matchup, not for nothing. Like, even if Korpisalo has been the better goalie and has, not been as bad as Swayman this year, he has still given up at least 3 goals against in half his starts. So you can get to him even if the Bruins only give up 22 or 23 shots. I think I like just going. I don't like Cole Sillinger as a player, but Sillinger, Johnson, Olivier being so cheap kind of interests me a little bit here. Sillinger and Johnson, like I said, not a fan, but, league average by expected goals, riding hot by shooting percentage, which is why they're scoring 3.9 goals per 60 minutes. But, Johnson's getting a ton of ice time. I think it's one of those filler stacks I would be okay with. If you're playing Colorado, expensive Leaf stack or something like that. So I guess Columbus 3 would be my favorite. I'm going to be honest. I hate saying it. I like Columbus 1. I don't know if I'm going to have any Blue Jackets in my lineup here tonight. Boston obviously is the big chalk spot in the night. Pasternak, Zacha, Geeky, nearly 20% ownership, 14.7% top two stack. They've been very good. 2.9 expected goals, 2.9 actual goals. Zacha's not shooting a lot. That's a little bit of an issue. Pasternak certainly has had his big shooting games of late. That Columbus top line, they've been backsliding a little bit defensively since the start of the season. I don't wonder if it's because they broke up Werenski and Provorov. Like, that was an excellent defensive pair that they basically broke up once they got Dante Fabro, and the team struggled. The top line has struggled defensively since. I honestly don't mind Pasternak, Zacha, Geeky here. If you want to dip down to Boston too, because they're more of a filler stack, I think that's fine. They played well. Brad Marchand still shooting the puck at a decent clip here. He's got 28 shots in his last 10 games. I just think I like Pasternak, Zacha, and Geeky more. Like with these, I think the Columbus defense pairs are very good offensively. I don't think that they're very good defensively. So with the goaltending struggling as much as it has for Columbus, I think this is a really good matchup for Boston. So I think I like Boston 1 best, then probably Columbus 1, and then Boston 2. But I do favor the Boston side here.
Yeah, I mean, I get why you would want to stack Boston 1. I just, Zacha needs to shoot more. It's a really good power play spot, so I want as many power play guys as I can. I prefer Boston 2 a little bit more, but I have a hard time stacking Boston without Pasternak anyway.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. Like, I would be fine with leaving off Coyle off Boston 2 and adding Pasternak, or leaving off Geeky off Boston 1 and adding Marchand, doing something like that. And because this is a really good power play spot, even if the Boston power play has been terrible.
Yeah. Nashville Predators with a 2.8 total heading into St. Louis. The Blues have a 2.6. This game sucks. Forsberg, Marchessault, Stamkos, O'Reilly, Nyquist, Zachary L., Evangelista, Novak, Jankowski. For Nashville, St. Louis running Kyrou, Shen, Holloway, Thomas, Buchnevich, Neighbors, and Falk off power play 1 for Dylan Holloway and Cam Fowler. Whatever. I don't particularly like Nashville 1 here. I haven't since they've been put together, mostly because they've been massive chalk. They aren't super chalky here, but they're 18,900, and they have not been good. A Forsberg one-off is fine, but I just can't stack these 3 guys together. That O'Reilly, Nyquist, Zach L. line is under 10K. You don't have to full stack, but O'Reilly, Nyquist is fine. They've been really good offensively. They are cheap enough where they fit with most lines here tonight, so I don't mind them. My favorite boys are Evangelista, Novak, like Cliffy said, though, there's no real need for an $8,100 line unless you're, jamming a Colorado power play stack. But if you are, I'd probably start around Novak Evangelista. But I don't have a ton of interest in Nashville here. Again, I don't have a ton of interest in St. Louis either. It is interesting that Dylan Holloway is on power play 1 now, so that gives that line 2 guys. That gives the Thomas line 2 guys. Like Nashville, does Nashville really have a good penalty kill? Like it's UC Saros that's saving everybody. I guess that's the most important piece of the penalty kill is your goalie, but the save percentage is ridiculous. I mean, the Blues power play is so bad that they just put Cam Fowler on it. So, I don't know. I wouldn't be stacking the Blues for power play, but I don't mind Kyrou Shen Holloway at 13,100 as a filler line here tonight. Oilers missed Dylan Holloway. They missed Broberg. These are guys that were important to the team, even if you didn't hear about them. You know what I mean? Because you always hear about the big boys. But Kyrou and Shen have been decent together. Holloway is pretty good offensively. There's no matchup that really concerns me on Nashville, so I prefer the Kyrou Shen Holloway line. If you want to go to Thomas Buchnevich Neighbors, that's fine, but I'd rather just save the 700 and go with Kyrou Shen Holloway.
Yeah, I'm going to start on the Nashville side here. It's not that I don't have interest in Nashville here, because one, St. Louis is starting Joel Hofer. Depending what numbers you look at, his overall save percentage has been better than Binnington's. Goal saved above expected has been worse. It does seem the team has been playing a little bit differently with the 2 goalies in net, which is kind of a weird thing. Sometimes you see that where a team will play differently based on which goalie is in net. But Binnington has seen way, way more high danger shots against than Hofer has, which is kind of weird. It's something it's not even close. If you look at natural stat tricks, high danger shots against, it's 40% more for Binnington than for Hofer. It's they're just kind of leaving Binnington out to dry. But anyways, Hofer does have I think it's a 911 save percentage overall, so can't really complain about that. The Nashville top line, the problem is it's not that I dislike them. I think I like them a little bit more than you do. They have been scoring. Shooting 15% as a line certainly helps. But even if they were shooting 10%, they would still be well above average offensively. The problem is they're 18,900. And depending on the night, they might only skate 17.5 to 18.5 minutes. It's that Buffalo 1 problem all over again. It's do I want to stack a line that's basically 19K? That Buffalo top line's 19K. This one's 18,900. Do I want to stack them if they're going to play 17, maybe 18 minutes here tonight? It's a lot to ask for an $18,900 line. Now, there are a lot of lines in that price range that there might be some ice time concerns. The New Jersey line, Meyer and Nason don't get a ton of ice time. Colorado 2, Colton and Middlestat, probably closer to 17 minutes. Toronto, Pacioretty's certainly not going to play a ton. There are ice time concerns with different lines. I just think for the whole line to be 17.5, 18.5 minutes, it's just not a lot. So I don't mind Nashville 1 here per se, but I do think there are other lines I'd rather play in that price range. Honestly, I'd rather just go play. I'd rather go play New Jersey, save $1,000 to go play that Hischier line instead. I do think that they're probably just a tier below that. I would rather play Nashville than Buffalo here tonight, let's say. But I do think I still prefer New Jersey and certainly teams like Vegas and Colorado over Nashville here tonight. I agree with you. I'm probably more inclined to play the depth. So honestly, the St. Louis side, I think I have more interest in here. Thomas Buchnevich Neighbors. It sucks Neighbors got kicked to the second power play unit, but they've been pretty good at 5-on-5. 2.9 expected goals, 3 actual goals per 60 minutes. Buchnevich and Thomas skating 20 to 21 minutes of late. 3.2% top 2 stack at a filler status. And they're going to go out against Nashville 1. And Nashville 1, even if they've been good offensively, they really have not been good defensively. 3.2 expected goals against. They've been saved by UC Saros. UC Saros has been pretty unreal for this team over the last month. if he's a great goaltender, so if he's on his game, then St. Louis could very well be shut out here tonight. Like, I'm not going to discount that, but I do think it's a good 5-on-5 matchup for the top line. 2 out of the 3 guys on the top power play unit. I think I'd rather go with St. Louis 1, but I honestly have more interest in St. Louis 1 and St. Louis 2 than I do anything on the Nashville side.
Yeah, I agree. I was just going to see if we got any line confirmations on the next game. We did not, but let's talk about it anyway. Minnesota Wild with a 2.5 total. Heading into Dallas, the Stars have a 3.1. Kirill Kaprizov is out for Minnesota. I would imagine they load the top line of Boldy, Zuccarello, Rossi. Remains to be seen. Dallas, still some question marks. We just don't know. What we have right now is Hintz, Robertson, Bork, Duchesne, Marchman, Blackwell, and then Johnston, Ben, Stankoven. But we don't know. These are all guesses. It's kind of hard to break down this game if we don't have Minnesota lines. But they've generally been pretty good defensively. Now, the problem is, Joe Eriksson Ek and Kirill Kaprizov are probably their 2 most important players. So, all bets are off on how they're going to play tonight. I just by default, even though Gustafson's in net, I have interest in Dallas here. It's just we don't have the Dallas lines. I would imagine Johnston and Ben are together. I would imagine Hintz and Robertson are together. Duchesne and Marchman are going to be together. You just don't know if it's going to be Donanoff on their wing, Bork, Blackwell, Stankoven, you know what I mean? It's you could build in pairs, I would imagine. It's just I don't know. I need to see what the lines are going to be. I'm not even sure what to say here because, if it is Hartman, Gaudreau, Johansson, that line has been generally pretty good defensively. You know what I mean? I just need to see lines of warm-ups before I can tell you because I would have some interest in the line going up against Rossi, Zuccarello, Boldy. I just don't know if they're going to be together. So do you have any take on this? Because I'm kind of at a loss on how to break this game down without lines on either side.
I mean, my first take is I think you probably spent 90 too many seconds talking about Minnesota here. It's
yeah,
without Kaprizov and Eriksson Ek, I had no interest in Minnesota in a single entry. People want to go play them, fine. Kaprizov is the guy. He's the guy that's made the top line go for years now. Go look at Boldy's numbers without Kaprizov or Eriksson Ek. They're not very good. Boldy is a very good player. I don't think, even with Rossi playing well, I don't think it's enough. Dallas is a very good team, straight up. And Jake Odger's generally played well. He's had a couple bad games, but I just have no interest in Minnesota here. So for me, it'd be the Dallas side. The question is what they do with their lines because they did switch them up in their last game before the break. They put Dadonov with Johnston and Ben, and they put Stankoven on the 4th line, moving Colin Blackwell next to Duchesne and Marchment. Now, Blackwell's apparently playing here tonight, so maybe he just goes back with Duchesne and Marchment. We really don't know what that lineup is going to look like. What I will say is I generally don't have a ton of interest in any line that has Evgeny Dadonov on it, so takes me out on Johnston and Ben, assuming he's there. I would probably go right back to Hintz, Robertson, and Bork. At least Robertson and Bork, not a big sample, 45 minutes, but those 2 on the ice, 3 expected goals, 5.1 actual goals, shooting a little under 14%, which is a bit high, but even 10, 11%, they'd still be scoring extremely well. They don't get a ton of ice time. But Roope Hintz over 2.5 shots per game over his last 20 games. He's got 11 goals in that span. It's just basically Robertson that's kind of suffered. Assuming Bork is on the top line, especially with how bad let's not forget, Dallas's top power play unit has started to turn it around a bit over the last few weeks after a slow start. And Minnesota's penalty kill has just been atrocious this season, last season, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter which coach either. It doesn't matter who's healthy or who's not. It's just been bad. So I think it's a pretty good matchup for the Dallas top power play. So Hintz, Robertson, and Bork, I think is easily my favorite line in this game. And they're not coming in with very much ownership, 3.7%, 2.2% top two stack. I think Duchesne, Marchment, and Blackwell, if they are aligned, could be fine. Like Blackwell's a decent player. I would prefer Stanko in there, but we just won't know until warm up. So I'd say for now, assuming Bork's on the top line, it's Hintz, Robertson, and Bork for me. And that's probably it out of this game.
Clayton says Bork was at top line in morning skate to down off line 2. I can't find these lines, but Clayton is a wizard, so thank you, Clayton. Woo. Colorado Avalanche, excuse me, with a 3.4 total. Heading into Utah, the Soakers have a 3 total. We don't have Colorado lines. Blackwell was line 4, Clayton says, so it looks like it's going to be Johnston, Ben, and Stankoven. Colorado didn't report lines at their morning skate. Cliffy mentioned to me before the show that he doubts they're going to change lines after they won the other night. So that'd be McKinnon, Lehkonen, Valor, Nichushkin, Rantanen, and Colton, Middlestat. Utah running out Keller, Schmaltz, Hayton, Genther, Cooley, McBain, Bugstad, Krause, Michelli. Now, obviously, Colorado is a focal point anytime they play on a slate. Here, not too much different. McKinnon, Lehkonen, and Nichushkin, 21,500, 22.1% top two stack, and 9.8% projected ownership. Now, this is a pretty tough 5-on-5 matchup relative to other matchups, I guess. Like that top line for Utah has been very good. The problem is like Colorado's matchup proof. Now it is a good power play matchup. So if you do want to leave off Lehkonen and add in Colton, that will save you a couple bucks. If you want to get really expensive, you could go McKinnon, Rantanen, and Nichushkin. Either way, like they're not coming in with a ton of ownership. So I think, getting just straight on full stacking is fine. But I want as much power play correlation as I can get. So for me anyway, in single entry, if I'm playing Colorado, I'm going to leave off Lehkonen and add in one of Mikko, Colton, and then, see if I can fit in the car and go about my day. I don't have too much interest in Colorado 2 as a full stack. There were a couple of weeks this season where you could stack Colorado without McKinnon because he wasn't shooting. That window has closed. It's almost impossible for me to stack Colorado without McKinnon here. So I'm going to do some sort of McKinnon, Nichushkin power play stack. If you want to leave Lehkonen, that's fine. Like, this line is really, really good. So that's fine. But me personally, I'm adding in a power play guy. On the Utah side, at 14,600, I do have interest in that Keller, Schmaltz, Hayton line. Like, they're fine. They've been really good this season. I don't love them. I think, I would dip down to Cooley, Genther, McBain. McBain shaved his mustache so that, he's the new mythical creature of the week. But they are only 13,300. They're a filler. Genther's the straw that stirs the drink. So I prefer Utah 2 here, but this is a Colorado 1, Colorado power play game for me.
Yeah. Big surprise. I do like Colorado here as well. Like this top line has been good. It hasn't been a big sample. We're talking like maybe 4 games worth. But 4.6 expected goals, 5.2 actual goals. Even though Lehkonen's not been on the top power play, still skating a lot, certainly getting close to 20 minutes. The thing is, that Utah top line has genuinely been very good defensively this year. 2.2 expected goals against, 1.8 actual goals against. Karl Vejmelka has generally been very good for Utah as well. But that top line not coming in with a lot of ownership, as you mentioned, under 10% against a 22% top 2 stack. I agree with you. I think I would be inclined to add guys and make it more of a power play stack, especially where Colton is cheaper than Lehkonen. So like you can do a Colton, Nichushkin, McKinnon stack for a little bit cheaper, and it actually brings that line closer to 21K. $400 doesn't matter a huge deal, but it does give you that power play correlation. Utah has been one of the most penalized teams in the league all season. Over the last 5 weeks, they're still one of the most penalized teams in the league at 3.5 times shorthanded per game. The only team taking more penalties is Montreal. So, this is a really good power play spot for Colorado. The Colorado power play has been better with Ross Colton. Some of it's shooting percentage driven. They're still shooting over 25% with Ross Colton there. Like, that's pretty high. But if they can get 4, maybe even 5 power play opportunities, you got to think they convert at least one of them. So I do agree, like some sort of Colorado power play stack is probably where I would go. I prefer that over just like straight up playing Colorado 1 or something, though. I think it's fine because Lehkonen gets so many minutes, but I would really want to focus on the power play guys here. So Colorado power play for me. On the Utah side, like I have a little bit of interest here in the Utah top line. Like, for as good as Colorado 1 has been offensively, 3.6 expected goals against per 60. Mackenzie Blackwood has played pretty well in net for the Avs, so that's made the difference. But this Utah top line, early in the season they were great. Lately they've been great. On balance, 3.1 expected goals, 3.4 actual goals per 60 minutes of 5-on-5. Schmaltz and Keller getting close, 19, maybe even 20 minutes. Colorado penalty kills, fine, certainly not elite or anything. I kind of like the Utah top line here, 14,600. They're not carrying very much ownership, and they are a very good line. I think I would compare them kind of to Columbus. Only Columbus is perfectly correlated, whereas it's only 2 out of the 3 here. You want to take off Hayden and put in Genter or Cooley, specifically Cooley, because you do get another center. I think that's perfectly fine. I think it's the Utah top line that I easily like best on their side. It's Colorado power play I like best in this game, but the Utah has a 3.1 total. Like, that's not nothing. I really do like that Utah top line here in this matchup with the way that they've been playing.
Yeah, I mean, that Utah top line has been good for years, outside of last year when Hayden could not stay healthy. So, makes some sense there. Let's get to the late hammer of the evening, and unfortunately, it involves the Sharks. Vegas Golden Knights with a 3.8 total heading into San Jose. The Sharks have a 2.6. William Eklund and Jake Wallman are out for the Sharks. Jake Wallman being out for the Sharks is a bigger deal than William Eklund being out. Sharks also made their lines unplayable. Granlund, Toffoli, Barclay, Goodrow, Celebrini, Zetterlund, Will Smith, Wenberg, Cunnin, Kovalenko. I have no interest in a Barclay Goodrow line. I'm out on that one. Celebrini, Zetterlund, Zetterlund, Will Smith, 13,600 with almost 10% projected ownership. No, I'm out on the Sharks. This is a Vegas game for me. For some reason, they're insistent on sending Barclay Goodrow out against top comp, and he is going to get run the fuck over. It doesn't matter what is happening here. I don't even care that Eichel, Stone, Olofsson only have 2.5 expected goals per 60. If you're facing Barclay Goodrow, that's an automatic 38% bump just by taking the ice. It's science. So I am very interested in Eichel, Stone, Olofsson here. They're fully correlated. It's an unbelievably good power play spot. They're 19,200. They're my favorite line in that 19,000 range. We talked about, Toronto, the Tavares line, the Buffalo 1 line, Jack Hughes line. I much prefer Vegas to all of them. Jake Wallman being out, super important here. Without him, they are much, much worse. In single entry contest, you'll see Eichel probably push 30%, But this is one of those spots where this feels like good chalk. If you are someone who worries about ownership percentage, you can dip down to Hurdle, Carlson, Colasar here. They are coming in very negatively leveraged at 11.5% projected, but they're only 12,700, and Hurdle and Carlson have been excellent together this year. The issue that I have is you only get Hurdle on the top power play unit, and this is an unbelievable power play spot. So that's why I would default to Vegas 1. But if you need a filler, if you're playing Colorado or something, you can use that second line. But that Vegas top line is probably my favorite line of the night. You can make an argument for Colorado, obviously, but they're right up there.
Yeah, pretty easily. I think the line that we both favor in this game is Vegas 1. Eichel, Stone, Olofsson, all perfectly correlated on the power play. The Vegas power play with Olofsson there has been pretty good. Again, it's kind of like Colorado with Colton. Like Vegas's power play shooting 24% with Olofsson there. So what this looks like when they're shooting 17, 16%, I think is a different story. But the San Jose penalty kill is not that good. Now, Vegas doesn't draw a ton of power plays. They only might get a couple power plays here tonight. So they really have to make hay when they get them. But, it is a good power play matchup. You mentioned Jake Wallman being out. Like, it is a stark difference. Michael Granlund's expected goals against goes up like 17%. When he doesn't have Wallman, his actual goals against goes up like 60%. Like defensively, Wallman has made a huge difference across the board, especially for that Granlund line that is going to be in the shutdown role. Like without him, there's nothing to worry about for shutdown from a shutdown perspective on the San Jose side. So I really, really do like Vegas 1 here. Even there isn't a sample with Olofsson, but 65 minutes without Ivan Barbashev on the top line, they're still at 3.4 expected goals and 4.6 actual goals. So they've been scoring real well, regardless of who the third wheel has been. Olofsson likes to shoot. Seems like that's a perfect player to put with two guys like Eichel and Stone. And again, they're perfectly correlated. So yeah, I really do like Vegas 1. You want to dip down to Vegas 2 or Vegas 3 or something, I have no issue with that. But I think I want to take advantage of that perfectly correlated top line here for Vegas. On the San Jose side, I don't have very much interest in the Sharks. Certainly no interest in any line with Barclay Goodrow on it. Celebrini playing without Tyler Toffoli and without Jake Wallman, like the best offensive defenseman and the best offensive forward that they have. Like he's being asked to carry Fabian Zetterlund and Will Smith. And like, I think that's just asking a lot. It's probably notable that, I got those lines mixed up. No, Zetterlund with Celebrini and Smith. Yeah. It's probably notable that, Celebrini and Zetterlund 2.2 expected goals in their 110 minutes together this season. Like they haven't been able to generate a lot. Part of that time, not much of that time was with Tyler Toffoli. And I think that kind of highlights the issue with San Jose is like any line, if you don't have Celebrini and Toffoli, you're just relying on a lot of ice time. I'm just kind of stumbling my words here. I don't have any interest in the Sharks. You want to one-off Toffoli or Celebrini or something like that, I think that's fine. Like if they're your last man into a lineup, but I'm not stacking the Sharks. For me, this is a Vegas game, and I really like Vegas 1.
I'm pretty much always going to be out on the Sharks for two things. If Jake Wallman's out, the only way I'm playing Sharks is if Celebrini's with Toffoli. If Celebrini isn't with Toffoli and Wallman's out, I'm out on the Sharks.
Yeah,
that's just my general rule. Let's talk about defensemen here at the top of the board. We have Makar, Werenski, Yossi, Rasmus Dahlin, Dougie Hamilton, Miro Heiskanen. I do like the idea of spending up for Cale Makar here. It would be very, very hard to fit with a Colorado 1 stack. You can make it work. I think he is a very interesting one-off here. I prefer him to Werenski. It's only a $400 difference, and Makar's in a much better power play spot here. So It'd be Makar 1, Yossi 2 for me. I think Dougie Hamilton's in an interesting spot if you want to live on Narrative Street. He is back in Carolina. Not that that really changes much for me, but I don't mind him. Miro Hastings in a decent spot. He's in a good power play spot. But yeah, it would be Makar 1, Yossi 2, W3 for me.
Yeah. Stochastic projections have Makar and Werenski basically in a tier by themselves, especially when you consider that it's $400 price difference. It's not nothing. I would go with Makar 1, Werenski 2, just because, Werenski does get a lot of ice time. He does like to shoot. Problem is like you probably need a multi-point game out of him. Maybe he gets the five shot bonus, but I think Makar is my number one. Makar is the stochastic number one, so I think he's the best play on the board. Werenski's fine. I think especially if you're playing a bunch of lineups. After that, I think Yossi and Dahlin are both okay. I'm not super stoked to play either. I honestly would probably rather just find the extra salary and go play one of Makar or Werenski, or just go to somebody much cheaper. There are a lot of guys in that mid-price range I think are playable here. Like Alex Pietrangelo, certainly in a very good matchup against San Jose. Charlie McAvoy in a very good matchup against Columbus. Owen Power, I guess he's fine against Chicago, but Shea Theodore and Seth Jones, especially Seth Jones hasn't played a lot this year, but this is a guy that can put up a combo meal, and it's not like Buffalo has generally been very good defensively for a couple months now. So I think, Theodore and Jones certainly make a lot of sense. Mikhail Sergachev, I think, is okay, but at this point, I think you're really relying on him to score to really get there. That's always concerning. Noah Hannafin, if you're paying down a little, I think is certainly in play. Thomas Harley for Dallas, with all the injuries that they have. Ian Cole, not a enticing name necessarily, but he does block a ton of shots, and if he can donk and assist with that block bonus, then you're kind of in business. Luke Hughes over the last, I think it's 10 games for New Jersey, leads their blue line in ice time per game. He's the only defenseman getting over 21 minutes a game. Chris Tanev, I think perfectly fine from Toronto. He's back in the lineup. For the super cheap defenseman, I guess Cam Fowler, he's getting top power play time and he's getting minutes. That's got to be worth something at 2,900. Andrew Peak, revenge game for Boston. He's back in the lineup, I guess. Brett Pesce, Sam Malinsky, Jalen Chatfield, I think is okay, but I would probably prefer the New Jersey side for the cheap defenseman.
Almost made it through. I am struggling big time, if you couldn't tell. I mean, if you couldn't tell, it means you're not watching. But let's talk about goalies here. Top of the board, we have whoever starts for Vegas: Korpisalo, Blackwood, Woll, Saros, if he starts, and the Buffalo starter. I think if I'm spending up here, it would be for Saros, Blackwood, and I don't like spending $8,500 for a goalie, but if it is Aiden Hill, there is legitimate shutout equity here, so don't mind Aiden Hill at $8,500. Markstrom at $7,900 is fine. I think Jake Ottinger has a big bullet next to him, Wild without Kaprizov. Enough said. That would put Gustafsson in play, just from a shot volume standpoint, I would imagine. If you're going cheap, I don't mind Cam Talbot. That's probably as cheap as I'd go. From Melka is all right. Merzlikins, all right. Georgiev, scary, but I think Talbot is about as low as I'd go.
Yeah, I think Jake Ottinger's at the top of my board. No Kaprizov, no Eriksson. Even at the best of times, that power play wasn't very good. So as long as he doesn't get blown up at 5-on-5, which seems like it would be hard to do tonight, I think he'll be pretty good. Ottinger's going to carry a lot of ownership as well. I think I was looking at ownership projections. He's easily the highest projected goalie on the board here tonight. So ownership's not a concern. I think Jake Ottinger's the top of my board. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen would be interesting if he gets to start. I don't think he's been officially confirmed, but he's probably going to go. It's not like Chicago really score. Like I said, they've been riding hot more than generating well. So Ottinger, UPL, Saros certainly, I think is fine here tonight. Those would be the three guys that I would kind of pay up for. Amongst the cheap guys like Joel Hofer, I guess for St. Louis, like he's projecting well. He's easily the top projected cheap goalie here tonight. I think it would be him or Talbot. I agree would be the two goalies. So Hofer or Talbot for cheap guys. But I think it would be like Ottinger, UPL, and Saros at the top.
Yeah. My wife just texted me. She's watching the show and she goes, "You look like you've been hanging out with Bobby Boone for the past hour." So that's how you know I need some rest. We will be back tomorrow, though. Who you liking for your hat trick pick?
I think it's kind of chalky, maybe not. Who knows? But I'm going to Colorado, and I'm going Ross Colton.
Ross the boss. I'm going spicy just because it's a perceived tough matchup, but I'm going Nico Hischier.
Ooh, I like it. We do like New Jersey here tonight.
We will be back tomorrow. I will be taking a box of DayQuil before the show tomorrow. Good luck, everybody, and thanks for hanging out with us and dealing with my shenanigans. We'll see you tomorrow.
Good luck tonight, everyone.